We're live and we're going to start in the next 2 minutes.
Okay, great. How are you doing, Varsha?
Doing great. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm great.
We'll just wait for a couple of attendees to join in. Once they start joining in, we'll start the session in a minute. Okay, I think we should start. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome back for New Age Finance and Accounting Summit. I hope everybody is doing well. My name is Varsha. I'm from Khaleej Times. To begin with our next session for today, we have our topic for today basically is in times of disruption, focus on improving business outcomes. And our speaker for today is none other than Ms. Emma Shakespeare. We just to give you a little bit of introduction for Ms. Emma. Ms. Emma is a regional director for MENA SAP Concur. She joined SAP Concur in 2011 and moved to the emerging markets team in 2018 under EMEA South Executive Leadership Unit. In this role, Emma is responsible for leading regional sales across 4 countries globally within SAP Concur's MENA South organization. During her 9 years with the company, Emma has held both sales and leadership position in various market segments. And she has also played key role in growing SAP Concur's largest strategic global clients. So welcome, Ms. Emma. It's an absolute honor to have you on board today. And I'm looking forward to see your session. So do you make Yes.
All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to be talking about digital transformation in today's age. So the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. Can you see my screen, Varsha? Can everyone see my screen? Varsha, can you see my screen?
Oh, yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. All right, so thanks. Welcome everybody to this session. So I'm going to be talking about digital transformation in relation to employee spend and why it's the focus for today. So a bit of background on me. I think Varsha gave a great introduction. So I think as Varsha said, I'm 3 years into the region so far. All my career has been spent in spend management and helping organizations to digitally transform from an employee spend perspective. So what I'm going to be talking about is how SAP Concur can help you through that for this 20-minute session. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was that I think over the last 6 months, what I have seen quite a lot with IDC, with Gartner, with looking at various reports in terms of McKinsey, is that there are quite a lot of kind of top priorities from a CFO perspective. So I think once businesses resume back to normal and people start to begin traveling and looking at other areas of continuity, the first thing they're going to be doing is opening hiring positions. But then the second most important thing they're going to look at is employee spend. The focus is going to be around travel. It's going to be looking at entertainment and all of the spend that is initiated from an employee and how that can be managed. And if we think about employee spend is typically the second largest operating after salaries. So this is a key area for a lot of organizations where they can get some benefit from if they think about automation in general. So let's look at the top 3 things that you should consider from an employee spend perspective. The first one is looking at putting in a tool that will enable you and your employees to be much more productive and typically save them around 70% of their time. So end users nowadays are looking for business applications, which are very like consumer-like in terms of the feel and the approach. And I think the other great thing about implementing a tool would also be that the back office, the finance team, should be freed up on average by about 30 to 60%. So the first important thing is making sure that your employees are productive, making sure they're happy, making sure you're freeing up time so that they're doing more strategic work as opposed to inefficient, non-strategic work. The second thing is around cost containment. So how can we help companies to improve their liquidity position? How can we help companies to look and manage, control their budget upfront before it's incurred? This is a really large area. And what I'm going to be talking about is some of the inefficiencies that I see in this region in terms of how spend is managed and how you can get more control before any spend is incurred. And then the third thing is really about policy compliance and regulatory compliance as well. So a lot of companies have a policy. They often have a number of rules based on the budget, based on the category of expense, based on the certain type of spend it is. And it can be very difficult to control in a manual paper-based process. So I'll be talking a little bit about how you can manage the compliance around that. But also it could be regulatory, so it could be related to VAT, for instance. How can you manage and recover VAT, whether it's domestic or whether it's international? So those are the top three areas in terms of employee spend priorities, and that's really the theme for today's session. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is digital transformation. So what does digital transformation really mean? I think it means a lot of different things, but essentially it's a way to transform your whole employee spend process, regardless of where you sit in an organization. So if you're an end user, it will free you up to be more productive. If you're in procurement, how you procure, how you spend, how you look at budgeting, how you look at managing your suppliers, all comes into play here. And then from a finance perspective, if you have a finance team, you have finance processes, then how can you free them up to be more strategic as well? So when I talk about SAP Concur, what SAP Concur really manage is a number of employee spend processes. Now, I'll give you some examples of what I mean. As an example, that could mean booking travel. It could mean expensing a trip. It could mean requesting a cash advance or maybe getting petty cash. It could mean managing supplier invoices that are coming into finance. So I've named around 5 or 6 different types of processes already that can exist in an organization and can be very manual. So using Concur, it doesn't matter about the process that you have. Typically, when I meet with companies, they have 3 or 4 different systems, one to manage travel, one to manage expense, another one for invoice. And I think the key thing about Concur is regardless of the process, it's one platform, everything is in one place and can be managed in the correct way. I think the other key thing is a lot of organizations, as you can see on the screen, I've got some examples of some other applications. So some companies potentially, their employees may book directly on IHG using a corporate card, for instance. They may go and book using their personal card on Uber if they need to get a taxi to a business meeting. And even from those examples, there's lots of different payment methods that exist in an organization, in addition to lots of different processes. So the good thing about SAP Concur is regardless of what the payment method is, regardless of what the process is, it can all be managed in one place, in one platform, to give you the data and to give you the visibility. Now, one thing to consider when you are looking at choosing a tool to manage your spend is not just about automating one process. You have to choose a tool that can integrate to other tools, because that's really where the value is. It's not just about giving you access to one set of data. It's about bringing data in from a variety of different sources and giving you that insight. So I gave an example earlier about IHG. So when your employees book directly on the IHG website, that receipt information will automatically come into Concur. The same with Uber. If Uber was booked using a corporate card and also directly on the Uber site, not only will the receipt information come into Concur, but also the transaction, the card transaction, regardless of the bank, if it's Amex, if it's HSBC, if it's Citibank, regardless of the payment type, all of that data will automatically flow in to Concur as well. So I think really gone are the days when we should be operating on paper. Now it's all about mobile, digital transformation, giving your employees the tool that enables them to manage their spend in a much more efficient way. And using this example on screen, you can see that there is an example of an Excel sheet. It's an expense claim, but do we know who needs to approve the claim? Do we know what the policy is for that claim? Does it say whether it's in or out of budget? It's subject to human error. It's subject to overpayment. It's very hard to actually know the true cost. Whereas if you move to a systemized process, you can manage your policy, you can manage your budgets, you can manage the category of expense. Everybody gets visibility of the spend upfront, and so they can make more informed decisions. So having been in the market for 3 years now, particularly in the Middle East, there's a couple of things that I see that are still challenges today with a lot of organizations. So I've listed 2 areas really: how you allocate cash up front, and then also how you manage spend in general can also be automated. So currently in the market, a lot of companies give a blanket per diem upfront to their employees. They don't request receipt when they go on a trip. And also that trip can either be shortened or it can be extended. Now that is subject to a lot of human error, because then if the trip is extended, there's a reconciliation issue in the back office. And also if you're not asking for receipts, then where's the VAT reclaim? In order to have a VAT reclaim, you need to have the receipt information to recover domestic and international VAT. I think also when we look at the spend management solutions, so the expense process and the invoice process, this is also very manual. I think there's lots of steps along the way in the finance team in terms of how they receive receipts or invoices, how they scan those in, how they then match that and audit and verify that information, how they rekey that back into the finance system. There's lots of errors which are subject to duplication, I would say, and a lack of control, because in the majority of cases, it's a manual process. So what I want you to think about is, what are all the areas in your organization today that are manual, that involve employees that are having to initiate spend themselves? I've put some examples on the screen which show IT equipment, there's taxis, there's flights, there's hotels, there's restaurants. But it doesn't just stop there. It could be anything. So it could be marketing, it could be stationery, etc. You name it, it's a lot of different things. That any process that is manual, any process that is employee initiated can be managed using Concur. Now, what's the reason? What's the benefit of putting everything together in one place? Well, I think I spoke at the beginning about the fact that often in most companies, these processes all sit separately, either separately in a system or in a separate paper process somewhere. So there's normally a different step for how somebody would request travel. There's a separate form for how somebody would expense something. And there's often a separate system, separate process for invoicing. So by bringing it all together, you're really getting one set of data, one user experience. Not only are your end users going to be happy because they don't have multiple different systems and processes, but also managers have one application to approve everything. Finance team know where to go, procurement and how you spend can all be managed and simplified, but also your IT team. So your IT team don't have to then manage and maintain lots of different systems. It's just one platform to manage all of this data. I think the other good thing is that if you're going to keep all your processes together, you can also get pre-approval on that spend. So not only can you manage and automate, but you can also manage costs before they are incurred. So as an example, if you're going on a trip, you can get pre-approval for that. Maybe you want to have pre-approval for a cash advance or an expense. Maybe you want to have a purchase order created before something is invoiced. That can all be managed in Concur, as well as the budgets can all be tracked and managed in Concur for visibility, for data, and for control. So let's look at travel and expense in a little bit more detail now, because I've covered it at a really high level. So I think the first thing about travel is pre-approval. So I think before anyone does anything, before you spend money anywhere, the first step usually is you get a cash advance and you have to have some form of pre-approval. I think the key thing about this in Concur is that not only do you get the pre-approval solution, which is systemized, and it can obviously record things like, the location, the duration, the expected amounts, the project information, but it can also check the budget, so managers can make informed decisions. When you're booking a trip, another really good thing is that rather than having somebody contact a travel agency to then book a trip, an end user can do that on their phone. So they can book a trip directly on their phone. They don't need to ask the TMC, is this supplier in policy? Is this the right amount? Is this okay? Is it in budget? Because the system will tell the end user. So it frees up everyone along that process. From an expense point of view, the end user would get a mobile application, which would have OCR technology. The user would only need to take a picture using OCR technology. It would extrapolate the data and automatically create the report on behalf of the end user. So they're doing a lot less work, no manual process, just take a picture using OCR technology, and that is all that's required. Then we look at audit and pay. So we look at the back office process, because once everything's automated, it's in the system, there then needs to be a step of, well, how do we audit these receipts? How do we verify the information? And how do we pay our individuals? So you can also outsource that process as well to Concur, so that you don't have to do any manual tasks in finance. So we will do the audit check and also the payment of those expenses on your finance team's behalf. And then the benefit is that you get the reporting information. So you can look at what was booked versus what was actually expensed. You can look at total spend of vendor. I think by giving you access to the data, companies can then start to negotiate better and get better rates. So let's look at the invoice process now. Similar sort of thing from beginning to end. So I think along the way with invoice, there's lots of manual steps in most companies. The first step is initiating the purchase request. So some companies, they already have a system for how they create a purchase order, which is typically in their finance system, which is fine. In Concur, we give you this option as well. So you can request to spend goods or services, some money. That can go off for approval. Once it's approved, that purchase order will be sent to the vendor. Once the vendor then provides the goods and services, they will then send an invoice. And then this is where Concur really helps to capture the invoice information. So regardless of the format of the invoice, whether it's paper, whether it's email, we capture the invoice and we're able to then validate that information. So we capture it using OCR technology. It will automatically match it to a purchase order that's already waiting to be matched. And then any approvals, any exception routing that needs to be conducted can all be done in the system. I think the key thing about the approval step in Concur is that it can manage exactly your workflow. So a lot of companies typically, they have like a limit-based approval where if it goes over a threshold, it will then need to go to somebody else. That can be set up, but also they can approve things on the go. So there shouldn't be any bottlenecks, there shouldn't be any delays in terms of payments or anything like that. From a payment perspective, we do a similar thing as I showed already with expense, where we can also make payments to suppliers. And then we give you the reporting information at the end of it. And really it's the reporting, it's the data that everyone needs in order to make, more intelligent decisions, I would say. Whether it's operational, whether it's compliance, whether it's policy, risk related. If you want to know how long does it take for us to pay our suppliers, if you want to know your top spend, if you have a policy that says you have to have an invoice that matches a PO, you can look in the system here and it will show.
Yeah. Yeah, 4 o'clock.
Was that a question? Okay, yes, you could look in the system and then it will tell you whether or not a PO has been issued or not in the system. I think the other cool thing about reporting is that it's consolidated. So the more data you put in Concur, the better the spend reporting at the end, the consolidated spend reporting. And then I think the other key thing about Concur, you can look on our website, there's lots of case studies by industry, by employee size that we can give you. But I think the key thing from particularly in the last year, from what we keep reading, is that CFOs right now need access to their data at a much quicker pace. So IDC reports also substantiate this, and I think our own business cases point to the fact that employees are making them more productive. They can typically increase their productivity by around 70%. If we look at the finance back office team, they can improve their processes by up to 60%, between 30 to 60%. And overall, the payback in terms of Concur is around 5 months. So when you implement to when you start to see a return in terms of the return on investment, it's around 5 months. So I'd encourage everybody to, do some independent reading. I think we'll also provide some links as well at the end of this session, but the IDC report and looking at the business benefit is a really good place to start. So just to summarize, I covered a couple of things, but I started with what's the priorities right now for CFOs and why does it make sense to automate employee spend? And employee spend is the second largest operating costs after salaries in most organizations, but it's also the one area that's the least automated. So it's still on a paper process. So that means it's subject to error, but it also means it's a great opportunity to improve and to digitally transform. So why would you do this? Because you get better user experience by bringing all of those systems and those processes together, as I showed. It's better user experience. It's just one platform that everybody can use. The app ratings are very high. Productivity increases as a result. You as an organization and at CFO level, you get access to consolidated data. And once you get access to the data, you can then make better informed decisions because all your data is in one place. And what our customers tell us is they're able to start to recover more things like VAT because they're recording the correct receipt information. They're finding that they're more compliant with policy, and they don't have all these different systems to maintain as a result. So this is a summary in terms of why does it make sense to automate a number of these processes. So I'm actually at the end of my session. I hope I've done it in around 25 minutes, roughly. And I think we've got time, 5 minutes for questions. So I'm going to pass back to Varsha to see.
Yes, there are a couple of questions that all the attendees are asking. So some of them are like similar questions. So I'm going to start with Usaid Siddiqui wants to ask you, can we integrate this app to Microsoft 365 ERP?
Yes, so if it's, so the good thing about Concur is that if it's an ERP, regardless of what ERP it is, if it's Microsoft, Oracle, we're agnostic from that perspective. So not only, I think there's two levels with Microsoft. I think one is the ERP, the finance system, but then there's also the email and the attendees that you get. So there's also another function which I didn't really get time to talk about, but if you're booking, if you've got access to like client information on Microsoft 365 and you want to be able to import that as attendees into the system, we can also manage entertainment costs as well. So that can automatically be integrated in Concur. But any finance system can be integrated. It's not only SAP. We have the majority of our customers on Oracle globally and Microsoft globally. Were there any questions, Varsha?
Yeah. Yes, next question is through, Wasim is asking, does Concur, SAP Concur manage petty cash?
Yes, so I think so petty cash is often a thing that we've seen more of a trend here in the region. I think particularly because it's non-travel related. So often with the E&R industry, the retail industry, there's often like cash that's been allocated to certain outlets, and then that cash then needs to be managed some way. And typically petty cash is often just and then it's really difficult to be managed and automated. And also there's quite a lot of background noise, Varsha, so I don't know if you heard my answer there.
All right, one last question. We don't have the name of the person, but he's asking, is SAP Concur just for big multinationals?
No, so I think we've got many references in the region, local customers in the region, and we've also got global large organizations in the region as well. I think the key thing about Concur is that it's very scalable. So where it's a cloud business, everything's based on a subscription. So depending on the number of transactions that you do, whether it's invoices, whether it's travel requests or expenses, there's a model to suit you, whether you're SME or a medium size or a large business. So we do have some references based on scale on our website, which I believe will point you to at the end of this session.
All right, I think this is it. Thank you so much, Ms. Emma. It was amazing. The entire session was so informative. I also thank you to all the attendees. I would request all the attendees to please join in the next session. We have the next session starting at 1 o'clock, and we have Mr. Sanjeev Agarwal speaking about optimizing assets. And it's just on the right hand side of your screen, there's join session option. So I would request all the attendees to please attend the next session. Thank you, Ms. Emma. It was an absolute honor to have you on board speaking in detail about this. Thank you so much. All right, take care, bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for attending.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.